The Tsar tank. Russia built a rolling fortress in 1914 that looked more like a giant tricycle than a war machine. Two massive wheels stood nearly 30 feet tall in front, with a tiny wheel trailing behind. Engineers thought bigger wheels would roll over trenches and obstacles that stopped normal tanks. The design was catastrophic. The front wheels worked, but the rear wheel was too small and weak. It dug into soft ground and got stuck constantly. During the first real test, it sank into mud and never moved again. The Russian army abandoned it in the field, where it sat rusting for years. Soldiers nicknamed it the flying battleship, but it never flew and barely rolled. It proved that bigger isn't always better, especially when basic physics says no. The Krumlauf. Nazi Germany invented a rifle that shot around corners. It was a curved barrel attachment for the standard assault rifle. The barrel bent at 30, 45, or even 90-degree angles, with a periscope sight mounted on top. Soldiers could hide behind cover and fire at enemies without exposing themselves. The concept made sense in theory. In practice, it was a disaster. Bullets traveling through a curved barrel created massive friction and heat. The barrel warped after just a few dozen shots. Rounds tumbled unpredictably, making accuracy nearly impossible. Some versions exploded from the pressure buildup. The attachments were heavy, awkward, and broke constantly. Germany produced a few thousand, but soldiers hated them. By 1945, most were abandoned or lost. The curved gun proved that some problems can't be solved by bending the rules of physics. The Panjandrum. Britain designed a weapon in 1943 that looked like a carnival ride gone wrong. It was two massive wheels, 10 feet tall, connected by a drum packed with explosives. Rockets strapped to the wheel rims would spin it forward at 60 miles per hour. The plan was to roll it onto German beach defenses and detonate a ton of explosives on impact. Every test was a catastrophe. Rockets fired unevenly, sending it zigzagging across the beach. Some rockets fell off mid-run, flying randomly in all directions. In one test, it spun in circles, then charged back at the engineers who built it. Military officials and a camera crew watched it careen wildly before crashing into the sea. One rocket broke loose and chased a dog down the beach. The project was quietly canceled. Britain never admitted how much money they wasted on a rocket-powered wheel that couldn't roll straight. The wind cannon. Nazi scientists thought they could shoot air hard enough to destroy aircraft. They built a massive cannon that fired compressed air instead of shells. The barrel was several feet wide and connected to a combustion chamber. When fired, it created a vortex of wind strong enough to shatter wood at 500 feet. Engineers tested it on models and claimed it could break wings or flip planes mid-flight. In reality, it was useless. The wind blast dissipated too quickly. By the time it reached target altitude, it was just a strong breeze. The cannon was slow to reload, impossible to aim at moving aircraft, and completely impractical for combat. Germany wasted resources building prototypes while losing the war. The wind cannon proved that desperation breeds terrible ideas. Sometimes a weapon doesn't need to be complicated. It just needs to work. The Antonov, a 40. The Soviet Union strapped wings to a tank and tried to make it fly. In 1942, engineers attached massive, detachable wings and a tail to a T-60 light tank. The plan was to tow it behind a bomber, glide it into enemy territory, then drop it behind German lines. The crew would detach the wings and drive straight into battle. The first test flight nearly killed everyone involved. The tank was too heavy. The tow plane couldn't gain altitude and had to release early. The tank glided briefly, then crash-landed in a field. The crew survived, but the project didn't. Soviet command realized that gliding multi-ton vehicles into combat zones was suicide. Engineers proposed lighter versions, but Stalin wasn't interested in flying tanks anymore. Only one prototype was ever built. It sits in a museum now, a reminder that not every problem needs an aerial solution. The Vespa 150 TAP. France mounted a recoilless rifle on a scooter and called it an anti-tank weapon. In the 1,950 seconds, the French military needed something light enough for paratroopers, but powerful enough to destroy tanks. Their solution was to bolt a 75mm cannon onto a Vespa scooter. Soldiers were supposed to drive into position, dismount, prop the scooter against a tree or wall, then fire. The recoil was so violent it could flip the scooter or snap the frame. Accuracy was terrible because the platform was unstable. Aiming required wedging the scooter with rocks and praying. Loading the gun took 2 people and several minutes. By the time soldiers set up, enemy tanks had already moved or spotted them. France produced thousands anyway and deployed them in Algeria. Most were abandoned or destroyed. The anti-tank scooter proved that mobility and firepower don't always mix, especially on 2 wheels. The sticky bomb. Britain created a hand grenade covered in adhesive meant to stick to enemy tanks. It was a glass sphere filled with nitroglycerin, wrapped in a sticky fabric cover. Soldiers were supposed to run up to tanks, slap it on, then run away before it exploded. The problems started immediately. The adhesive stuck to everything except tanks. It glued itself to uniforms, guns, and the soldiers trying to throw it. Tank armor was often covered in dirt, mud, or grease, which prevented sticking. In wet conditions, the glue failed completely. The glass casing shattered easily, leaking explosive gel onto whoever carried it. Soldiers needed special bags to transport them safely. In combat, running toward a tank with a sticky ball was suicide. Most troops refused to use them. Britain issued thousands anyway. The sticky bomb taught a hard lesson. A weapon that endangers your own soldiers more than the enemy isn't a weapon. It's a liability. The Davy Crockett. America built a nuclear weapon small enough to fire from a tripod. During the Cold War, the U.S. wanted tactical nukes that individual soldiers could deploy. They created a recoilless rifle that launched a W-54 warhead, the smallest nuclear bomb ever made. It had a blast yield equivalent to 20 tons of TNT and could fire up to 2 miles. The radiation fallout was the real killer. Anyone within a quarter mile of impact would die from radiation poisoning within days. The problem was obvious. The minimum safe distance was larger than the maximum range. Firing it meant irradiating your own troops. Wind could blow fallout back toward friendly positions. There was no scenario where using it didn't kill Americans. The military deployed over 2,000 units to Europe anyway. Soldiers nicknamed it the atomic bazooka. It was retired in 1971 after commanders realized giving infantry nuclear weapons was insane. The Davy Crockett remains the only nuke designed to kill its own users. Project Pigeon. The U.S. military trained pigeons to guide missiles into targets. Psychologist B.F. Skinner proposed the idea in 1940. He conditioned pigeons to peck at images of enemy ships and buildings. The birds sat inside the nose cone of a missile behind a small screen. As the missile flew, live video fed to the screen. When pigeons saw the target, they pecked at it. Their pecks controlled small motors that adjusted the missile's flight path. Multiple pigeons voted on direction to prevent errors. In tests, it worked. The pigeons guided missiles with shocking accuracy. But military leaders couldn't take it seriously. The idea of trusting warfare to birds felt absurd, even though the technology functioned. Funding was cut, then revived, then cut again. By the time officials considered it viable, electronic guidance systems had advanced. Project Pigeon was shelved in 1953. The program proved animals could guide weapons, but some ideas are too strange to survive, even when they work. Project Habakkuk. Britain planned to build an aircraft carrier made of ice. During World War II, German U-boats were sinking Allied ships faster than they could be replaced. Churchill needed unsinkable platforms for planes to patrol the Atlantic. A scientist proposed freezing seawater mixed with wood pulp into a super-strong material called pykrete. The ice ship would be massive, over 2,000 feet long, with walls 40 feet thick. Torpedoes couldn't sink it. Damage would just refreeze. A small prototype was built in Canada and worked. The ice stayed frozen even in summer with basic refrigeration. But the scale was impossible. It required 300,000 tons of ice, 25,000 tons of insulation, and a construction time of 8 months. The cost exceeded building multiple steel carriers. Worse, by the time it launched, it would already be obsolete. The Allies were winning the Battle of the Atlantic without it. The project was cancelled in 1943. A giant floating iceberg with a flight deck remains one of the strangest ideas the military ever seriously funded. Blue Peacock. Britain designed nuclear landmines kept warm by live chickens. In the 1,950 seconds, the plan was to bury atomic bombs along the German border to stop Soviet tank invasions. The bombs needed to stay operational in freezing temperatures. Electronics would fail in extreme cold. British engineers solved this with chickens. They sealed live birds inside the mine casing with enough food and water for a week. Body heat from the chickens kept the electronics warm and functional. The mines were huge, weighing 7 tons each, and required massive excavation. Placement took days, making them useless for rapid deployment. The radiation risk to troops burying them was never addressed. Military planners also ignored what happened to the chickens after a week. The project was declassified in 2004. Documents revealed Britain seriously considered detonating nukes on Allied soil and using poultry as heating systems. Blue Peacock was cancelled in 1958. Even during the Cold War, chicken-powered doomsday devices crossed a line. These weapons proved that desperation and bad ideas create the strangest military inventions. But if these were the ideas that got funded, imagine what got rejected. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment.